Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Today's episode is about how to achieve optimal health with Celia Chen. And over the past decade, Celia has made a significant impact as a CMO, investor, and advisor in the wellness industry, collaborating with leading founders, physicians, and longevity experts. She's helped develop products and services aimed at promoting a healthy lifestyle and preventing chronic disease. Celia has also played a key role in the growth of innovative wellness brands like Dosist, Prima, Symbiome, Little Saints, and AllSwell, particularly in emerging markets such as wellness-focused cannabis and microbiome-informed skincare. And she's a certified integrative health coach from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And she not only advises wellness brands, but also offers one-on-one coaching. So I am so excited to welcome Celia to the show. I've actually oftentimes reached out to her about specific health-related questions, and she just has a wealth of knowledge. So I'm excited to welcome Celia to the show. Welcome, Celia.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Celia, to kick it off, what does the word health mean to you?
Oh, it's such a good question. I think if you look at the official definition of health, it's the absence of disease. But for me, it means so much more. We often say like health is wealth, but for me, it's really about prosperity and freedom. I think if you have your health, then you can really have those two things.
And, tell me a little bit why you decided to spend so much of your career, and especially the last, I'd say 10 years or so, in the health and wellness space. Why did you decide to dedicate so much of your time in this space?
I think like a lot of founders, we try to tackle really big problems, complex problems, but a lot of the times the real passion for it comes from something that's personal. So I had lost my mom to lung cancer a couple of years before I really got into kind of really optimizing health for myself. And it was such a wake-up call to figure out pieces of the puzzle that I really thought, well, why don't people understand this? So, my job in marketing is to really understand how to deliver messages. And it's been a bit of a superpower in working with these leading founders to solve these complex problems and to bring things that are complicated to market. So in my own journey, I really found that everything that I learned was something that I couldn't believe that my friends and my family and my colleagues didn't know. And so my professional life and my personal journey really meshed. And it's been really kind of the defining force of what I do and why I get up every day and what makes me feel really alive.
I love that. And, Celia, let's dive into some of the common misconceptions people, face when they're trying to optimize their health. I feel like there's so many categories that we could dive into, but what are some kind of general themes that you've noticed or that you come across?
So one of the greatest misconceptions is that health optimization is difficult or expensive, but really it's quite simple. It's about mastering those fundamentals. So if you can address your diet, your sleep, relationships, movement, environment, those are a lot of really major contributions that you can make to your health. And it's something that I advise my clients on. There are little things that you can do to really change your outcomes and how you feel today.
So, Celia, I'm curious, what are some of the biggest things that people come to you with? Like, I know that you focus on a number of different areas of health, like you mentioned, sleep, and I don't even know if you do focus on sleep, maybe not, but I know you focus on things like, glucose levels, and a lot of things in the women's health realm. So I'm curious, what are some of the first things that you would be advising people about when they come to you for advice on some of those areas?
I think everyone comes to me essentially for the same thing, but they have different symptoms.
Mm.
And what I advise everyone on is that they're actually all part of the same problem. So my clients are busy executives, busy moms, all of us who want to have these really big, extraordinary lives. And in a way, they want to perform at the level of an elite athlete in their life, but they're not necessarily doing what it takes to have that level of performance. How are you fueling your body? Are you resting? Are you recovering? And so the complaints are kind of similar. The symptoms are kind of similar. A lot of times it's energy. I have a lack of energy. I'm fatigued. I have mood swings. Maybe I've gained weight. I can't manage my stress, which shows up as sleep. And so it's really never just one thing. And so when someone says, well, do you specialize in sleep? I'm like, well, I don't specialize in sleep, but it's all these major contributors to your overall health. So the area that I tackle, which I think if you can get your blood sugar regulation under control, you are ahead of the game because it really impacts everything. So people just think of it as, oh, I'm just spiking for my blood sugar. Maybe I'm craving some sugar in the afternoon or that second cup of coffee. Really, what we're doing every day is putting ourselves on a blood sugar roller coaster. And so metabolism, blood sugar regulation, is really the first place that I start. And because a lot of these symptoms present themselves when people hit their 40s, kind of like all the things that you got away with in your 20s and 30s don't jive anymore, I really address a lot of the issues of midlife. So one of the big areas that we cannot ignore is menopause, because men are also aging in their 40s, but they're not dealing with that drastic drop in hormones. And it's just another layer. So really it's metabolism, blood sugar regulation, and the complications that menopause brings to addressing those issues.
Right. I want to double click on menopause, but before we get into that, I'd love to spend a little time on blood sugar regulation, since it's such a big area and topic that I think a lot of people are thinking about. And it just seems like there's so much content about it. And I mean, when I was growing up, I just felt like that was only something diabetics thought about, right? And so I'm really curious, like, what does it mean? First of all, maybe we could define some terms for those who are listening. We have quite the global audience, right? And, I started tracking my blood sugar levels about a year ago, just out of curiosity. And it was so revelatory what I found, because I had no idea that the way I was eating and what I was eating and when I was eating it could make such a big impact on my overall energy levels for the day, and also how I felt, at night, when I sleep at night. So I'm curious, maybe we can even introduce a case study, right, of someone that you've worked with, or maybe your own personal journey of blood sugar regulation, and define some of these terms, like walk us through it as if we were beginners.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to use myself as the best case study because it was so eye-opening to me. I think a lot of people can relate to the life that I was leading. I was living in New York. I was an executive at Condé Nast. I was traveling on a red eye every 6 weeks. And, it's this belief that you're productive and you're getting all this done and like whatever it takes. And it really shows up in ways that we normalize today. So like I mentioned, with my clients who come to me with this long list of symptoms, I had a lot of those symptoms, but I just thought it was burnout. I thought it was like, okay, maybe I'm getting a little older. I can't keep up. And those were things like energy crashes, fatigue, my skin would break out always before some big fashion event, and what I realized was that my blood sugar had been creeping up over the years, my biomarkers, but because they were still in range, I was always healthy. Oh, you're doing great. Maybe, do some extra yoga to, reduce the stress. But when it finally started to get close to being out of range, then my doctor said, oh, you're pre-diabetic. So now maybe you should go on metformin and maybe don't, drink so much soda. And I looked at her, I think my mouth was open. Do you really think that I'm drinking soda? I really considered myself to be a healthy person. So I think so many people that are listening are doing what they think is healthy. They think that having that crash at 11 o'clock from, eating that oatmeal that again is healthy with that banana, right? I'm a little hungry. I'm a little tired. I must have a fast metabolism. I'm hungry again. I need to eat something. I need to have a snack. And then you have a sandwich and then you're seated at your desk all day, 3 o'clock rolls around, I'm kind of craving some sugar. Maybe I'm going to have half a cookie. Maybe I'm going to have some more caffeine. Go out to dinner, a little anxious, take the edge off, a glass or two of wine, don't sleep, rinse and repeat. It is literally how we live today, and it is literally what is making all of us sick. So when I got that diagnosis of prediabetes, I was just not satisfied with the answer of take medication. And it's not that I'm anti-pharma. I think it can help in a lot of different cases. But had I taken that metformin and just taken a pill to solve my problem, air quotes, it would have cheated me in understanding how my body works. And so I called our mutual friend, Dr. Molly Maloof. I'm like, Molly, my blood sugar is elevated. I'm a healthy person. I have a healthy weight. I've never had to deal with any of these issues. But if I'm honest, I don't feel great. And she was the one that said, you have to join the beta at levels and put a CGM on and really understand what is spiking your blood sugar. And just like you, as a fellow curious, wellness seeker, and when you learn it and you visualize it by seeing what happens when you eat certain foods, or when you take a really stressful call with a client, or if you work out or you get a great night of sleep, when you see all of those impacts on your blood sugar and you can correlate how you feel with what's happening on your monitor. And for those of you who don't know, a continuous glucose monitor is something that it's a tiny little filament. It has an adhesive. It's on your upper arm or an area where you have a little bit of fat, and it continuously monitors your glucose. It's not painful. It's measuring the fluid in your interstitial tissue. And in a way, it's democratized your health data. I don't have to wait for a blood test, which is only a snapshot in time. I can see in real time my decisions and how they're impacting not only how I feel and my energy level and my ability to sleep, or my resilience to stress, or my mood. It's also going to impact my long-term health. So to go back to my biomarkers as a case study, so I want people to understand. So your biomarkers, your levels are in range until they're not. And then when they're not, the first course of action is generally medication, or that's when they tell you to start paying attention. And the thing that really infuriated me, and the reason why I do this today, is that what I learned was that this was not something that happened overnight. That my elevated blood sugar, my elevated fasting glucose, my cholesterol that had been inching up, that had been happening for about 10 to 15 years. And this glucose roller coaster that I was on was something that I could have prevented had I understand the mechanics of metabolism. So when we say metabolism, and maybe I'll take a moment to define this for the audience. So when people think of metabolism, they think of slow metabolism, fast metabolism, right? They think of it in terms of weight. But really, you want to think of metabolism as how your body converts food into energy and how it uses that energy to power all the cells of your body. And so when someone says prediabetes, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's like, oh, good, I just don't have diabetes yet. But actually, it's quite advanced metabolic dysfunction. And what's metabolic dysfunction? It's when the process of my body converting food into energy becomes impaired, and my cells become less responsive to insulin, which causes too much glucose in the bloodstream. And on your biomarkers, it shows up as elevated cholesterol, glucose, blood pressure, and it is one of the major drivers, if not the reason for 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death. So when I looked at my own case and solved for it and reversed all my symptoms and reversed my prediabetes, I was really, really passionate about sharing it with anyone who would listen. I think I went to every party and I'd be sitting in a corner and my friends are like, I bet you $10 she's talking about blood glucose. Not the sexiest topic, but something that I really wished everyone would know. And 3 years later, out of beta, all these CGM companies are popping up. All of these data tech biowearables companies are popping up. And what we're seeing is a democratization of health data and access to information. It's no longer closely guarded, closely held information that you have to get from your doctor. It's something that each and every patient can advocate for and learn. So I became my own test case and I biohacked my way back to health in a way. I was lucky because I'm surrounded by, practitioners and doctors and people who really understand this space. But I think what we're seeing is that we are getting sicker as a society because of the way that we live. And so we all need to understand that health doesn't, start in a doctor's office. It's really with every little micro decision that we make. So it led me to really want to coach, to be an educator. It's something that I had done in my role as a chief marketing officer, to build these large education programs for brands. And now I'm just talking directly to the customer. I'm talking directly to clients and patients, and really trying to educate around this issue of metabolic dysfunction, which is really, I think, the largest contributor to chronic disease, but it can also be the largest contributor to optimal health.
Okay, Celia, you said so much, so much to double click on here. I want to actually talk about like what happens when your glucose goes over. So, I have, it's so funny. We're like throwing out all these apps that we have. I have Signos. I have Signos. I'm not an affiliate. But it's interesting, like, because I didn't even know what it even meant to go over my normal glucose levels. So when I started tracking it, I was kind of just very much a beginner in this whole, space. I didn't actually have, I guess, an expert to speak with. But it's pretty intuitive. Like the app itself is pretty intuitive, but I think it was quite alarming to see how like something as simple as eating a banana, could skyrocket my glucose to like an extremely high amount. So I'm curious, what does it mean for you? What are normal levels? In the Signos app, I think it's like 80 to 115 mg. But I think for people listening, I'm sure that they'd be curious to understand, like, what does it mean to have normal glucose levels? Is it normal to spike every now and then, kind of as we move through this world in the West? The way that we eat, like you said, is like we eat and then we sit. I did notice also that movement right after a meal, like going for a walk, could completely change my glucose levels like within 5 to 10 minutes. So that was pretty revelatory for me too. Just like the practice of actually walking after a meal as opposed to just sitting. Like that's really, I think, where the disease maybe part starts, or like the illness part starts, like that our body's just like not able to take in everything that we're eating in one sitting. So yeah, I'm curious what you have to say about all those topics.
Yeah, so I think that a CGM gives you really valuable data. I also encourage people to not get too hung up on the numbers, because it's not about having a perfect score. I think what a CGM does for people, it helps them visualize the inputs, right? So what is happening? Some of my biggest spikes weren't from food. I mean, I'll tell you, my biggest spike was from sushi. And it was a very sad day because I love sushi. I always thought it was like a clean meal, like clean fish, a little bit of rice, maybe some seaweed. But because it doesn't have a lot of fiber and there's sugar a lot of the times in the sushi rice, so my blood sugar went crazy. It spiked by kind of maybe 70 points, right? But also, I also had a really stressful call with a client or investor or someone like that. And I also watched my blood sugar shoot up, and it was not food related. So it's fascinating when you see those things. So I encourage everyone that has a CGM or wants to put on a CGM to understand what's going on with their blood glucose is look for the trends and look for the patterns. Everyone will spike a little bit when they eat food because you're introducing glucose into your system, and your body is going to metabolize that. You're going to digest that. It's going to go into the bloodstream. And if you have a certain amount of glucose and you've got healthy cells, you're able to then be able to convert that into energy. It's the way that we live today where we eat so much and then we don't use our fuel that we're not disposing of the glucose. And the cells kind of get packed, like too packed, where, you become less responsive to the insulin, and you have too much glucose in your bloodstream. And what that means is that, it will cause oxidative stress, and it will start to damage your blood vessels. So when I say that metabolic dysfunction and blood sugar dysregulation is a driver of chronic disease, what I mean by that is that the way that we live today, where we're eating high caloric foods that are low in fiber and protein, that are addictive, and then we sit all day long when we're meant to move, we're not disposing of the glucose. It's almost like a mismatched energy where we're fueling up and then we're not going anywhere. It's like packing your car for a road trip and then not using any of the resources. You're just going to sit in the driveway, right? So you want to keep your body moving. And so I love it that you brought up walking after a meal. So whatever you eat, you'll watch your blood glucose go down. You'll see it spike, and then you'll see it go down because your muscles are expensive, like they're metabolically expensive. They will draw the glucose out of your bloodstream because they need it for fuel. So it's such an effective way to lower a spike. And to answer your question about like what is a healthy spike, if it will spike a little bit, but it's about, if you can keep it under 110, 120, and if the spike isn't more than, let's say, 30 or 40 points, when you start spiking to like 70 points, there's probably, some sugar in there. There's like refined carbs. You want to use that fuel. So it's not that you can't eat that. It's that you want to actually use it because you're fueling for a workout. You're fueling for some activity. You don't want to just sit. So I would say you'll also feel it on the way down. If you eat too much glucose, if you eat too many refined carbs, you'll feel a little jittery as you crash. So those are my tips with the CGM, but it is really fascinating to watch. And I don't know any of my clients or friends who have used it that haven't called me and said, wow, like it's so helpful because I've been able to make little edits to my diet.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've been using it, like I said, almost a year now. So it's been amazing just to notice how differently I eat compared to what I ate last year. And again, it's not so much about the weight. For me, it's about how I feel, like energetically. So Celia, I want to talk a little bit about bone density and also perimenopause and menopause. So let's talk a little bit about bone density, because I know that you have said many times that bone density is actually a very important metric to be tracking, especially as we age. Why is that the case?
So I'll just back up 1 second, because I think it's a really good segue from us talking about weight, right? Where we think if we're healthy and we're a healthy weight, then we're healthy. But what happens with weight is that the weight on a scale is very opaque. It doesn't actually tell you what you're made of. So one of the first things that I have all my clients do, and this is also what Peter Attia tells all of his clients to do, all of his patients to do, is you want to see what you're made of, so which includes your bone, right? So if you get a DEXA scan or if you do an in-body scan, you're going to be able to figure out what that weight is made of. And it is made up of four things, really. You're looking at your body fat. You're looking at your visceral fat. So body fat is the pinchable fat. Visceral fat is the fat that's around your organs. That's a really inflammatory fat. You can't pinch it. It's like underneath. Then you have your lean tissue, which includes organs and water, but it's really your muscle mass. And then the last is your bone density, your bone mineral density. So when you get a snapshot of what you're made of, it is a really good predictor of your health today, but especially your future health. So the reason why I'm so focused on bone density, especially for women, is that we lose up to 20% of our bone density in the 5 years after menopause. So menopause and perimenopause is a really precarious time for bone density. And a lot of people think of osteoporosis and they think, okay, that is in the future. Like that is something for old people, right? And the statistic is that 1 in 3 women over 50 will be affected by osteoporosis. And if you don't have a scan and you don't know what you're made of and you don't know how strong your bones are, osteoporosis is silent. You don't find out about it until you break something and you're in extreme pain. And so I think when you frame it in terms of longevity, you'll think, well, what does osteoporosis have to do with longevity? And I'm going to share a really sobering statistic that 30% of people over 65 who break a femur or a hip will not survive that fall. So I first heard that and I thought, what? Like, it is something that you say, okay, you know, for someone who's elderly, I don't want you to fall. You could hurt yourself. You're going to break a hip. But what does that actually mean? It means that you have diminished capacity, and it's a slippery slope at that age if you don't have a lot of muscle mass and you have weak bones, because a fall could mean that you're bedridden. Then you become bedridden and you lose a lot of your muscle mass. You lose more muscle mass, you lose more bone, because they're intimately tied together, right? Every time we work out and we do resistance training, we're putting mechanical stress on our bones and telling our bones that they need to be stronger. So this delicate relationship between muscle, which we're losing rapidly, and especially for women during menopause. When we lose our hormones, we are rapidly losing muscle and we are rapidly losing our bone mineral density. We need a new strategy in order to not just maintain what we have, but in order to not lose it as at a rate in which we really will be put in a very precarious position. I don't think we, as people who are, you know, potentially listening to this podcast, or maybe 30, 40, 50, it's really hard for us to think into the future at a time when we might have a diminished capacity. Like, I love to travel, and I think, is there going to be a time where I won't be able to lift my suitcase and put it in the carry-on, like the carry-on above the overhead compartment, or walk to the furthest gate? Will I still have that independence? Will I be able to lift my grandchild? You know, will I be able to get up from the toilet? We cannot think of a time when we won't be able to do those things. When you look at the rate and loss of muscle mass and bone density, if we don't do something about it when we're younger, we won't have the buffer. We won't have something to protect us as we start to lose it. So I don't want to be all gloom and doom. There's a lot we can do, right? There's a lot we can do in terms of resistance training and nutrition, but I want people to be mindful of it when they're young and vital so that they can remain young and vital.
So, Celia, you know, in terms of bone density, what can we do today to improve our bone density health? Like, 'cause even if, you know, like you said, like even if we're younger, you know, what can we do on a day-to-day basis? And I'm also curious what we can do from a nutrient perspective.
Yeah, I mean, really good questions. And I think what people can incorporate very easily. So you want to have some impact on your bone. So it can be little things. It can be jumping 10 to 20 times a day, you know, and that's skipping, jumping rope, jumping on a mini trampoline even. So, you know, you want to have some mechanical stress on your bones so that it signals your bone to, you know, build more bone. You also want to do that with your muscles, right? So you want to build more muscle mass. And we think of muscle as, oh, it's just like, it looks good, you know, it's like bodybuilding. No, your muscle, okay, is holding up your skeleton, right? So that it's going to prevent you from falling. And your muscle is not just about the muscle mass, it's about the muscle strength and power. So if you trip on a curb, or in my case, always tripping over something, I put like my bag on the floor, tripping, can I get my foot out fast enough to catch my fall? Or am I actually going to fall? And if I fall, am I going to be able to sustain that fall, or am I going to fracture? You know, so I would say jumping, if you love to walk, maybe add a weighted vest. You know, that's something really easy. You could add just like an 8-pound weighted vest. You can really make sure your vitamin D, so vitamin D3 and K2. Yeah, you can get sunlight, but a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D3. So D3K2 specifically, because it'll direct the calcium to your bones and your teeth and not into your arteries. Calcium rich food, leafy greens, you know, just kind of keeping your general nutrition up. And I would say resistance training. And I say this louder for the women who are listening. You won't get bulky. Think about the guys in the gym. They have to work so hard to build and bulk. You will not bulk immediately. I mean, that would just be a freak of nature if you lifted 120-pound weight and bulked up immediately. So resistance training, lifting heavy, will also help to build bone. So I really kind of don't separate the bone conversation from the muscle conversation, because they really support each other.
Mm. Yeah, this is so powerful. So, and I'm curious, like in terms of, does it matter, I guess, like what age you're at? You talked a little bit about doing this as prevention, but is there sort of like a time where, let's say you get to age 60 or 70 or 80, where you suggest people maybe slow it down, or you think it's kind of like all the same?
So the best time to start was maybe yesterday. The second best time is today. So I would tell every single person listening, it doesn't matter how old you are, stay active. The younger you are, the more buffer you'll have. Okay. So you'll just be in a slightly better situation. It's not dissimilar to investing. So I'm at that age now where I'm like, hey kids, listen to me at 50. If it's really the compound interest of your 401k, it's the same thing with building bone and building muscle. So the earlier you start, the better you'll be for the long term. If you ignore it, you're just taking out a future deposit. But I would say to everyone, especially women that are going through perimenopause, which is really in your 40s, because the average age of menopause is 51. So your whole 40s, you really got to clean it up. In your 50s, it's non-negotiable. In your 60s and 70s, lift, walk with a weighted vest, make sure your nutrition is up. It's not too late to build bone and muscle. It does get incrementally more difficult. So I encourage everyone to start today. You can start with the little things and work your way up, but you need new strategies in order to deal with aging. You're really combating kind of some forces. And menopause, like the things you did in your 20s and 30s, if you still do those in your 40s and 50s, it's like you're trying to win at a game and no one told you the rules changed. So I'm here to tell you the rules have changed a little bit. We're throwing out some stressors here, but they're not insurmountable. It's just a change in strategy and a shift in mindset. And so it is never too late. I would say to anyone in their 60s and 70s listening to this, find a trainer, find someone who can help you start to lift weights. If you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, do check with your doctor to make sure that you're only lifting as much as your bones will be able to support, but it's never too late to start.
Amazing. And let's talk a little bit about perimenopause and menopause. What are some of the things that one should be thinking about as they move into this period of their life?
So I think that when we think of the word menopause, people use it as an umbrella term for the very long period of menopause. And so just to quickly explain it, so when you're born until you're 35, that can be considered pre-menopause, and that includes puberty, okay? So puberty is a time where your hormones are going a little crazy, and then they level out in your 20s and early 30s. Perimenopause starts as early as 35. And perimenopause is when your hormones start to decline and you become a little symptomatic. And there's a really long list of symptoms that are starting to tell you that your hormones are starting to fluctuate. I think that people know the symptoms of menopause more than they know what menopause is. So menopause is technically one day. The average age, at least in the US, is 51. I wouldn't say it's probably that different around the world, but the average age in the US is about 51. And it is when you haven't had 12 periods in a row. But perimenopause can be 4 to 10 years before that. So, it's really like this long moment. So menopause, one day. The rest of your life, okay, so 51, let's say you hit menopause. The rest of your life, you're living in post-menopause. The average life expectancy today is around 80. So this is a third of your life, and it can be a really vibrant, creative, productive chapter of your life, but you have to have your health and vitality and strength to be able to really maximize this time. You're no longer reproductive, but you're certainly productive. So when I want people to kind of understand that about menopause, it's just like you're not going through menopause in a way, you are in menopause, in a state of menopause for the rest of your life. And most of it will be in post menopause.
Mm-hmm. So, and then what are some of the things that one should be like eating or tracking or thinking about in both perimenopause and I guess moving into menopause? Maybe that period. Is there anything that we should be thinking about or tracking or consuming differently?
I want everyone to think about all the fundamentals of health that whether, if you're male, female, it's the same in terms of aging, all of the things that are good for you, right? Like those fundamentals. So whole foods, good sleep, lots of movement, healthy relationships, a non-toxic environment, all of those things are good for overall health. What I would say is that those things don't really change during menopause, but they become critical because we are working against some forces that the men don't experience. Their hormones don't fall off a cliff, ours do. So when we lose a lot of estrogen, we lose, like there are estrogen receptors all over our body. So, when you start to think about the symptoms of menopause, hot flashes, brain fog, weight gain, a lower libido, maybe a frozen shoulder, you've got it's because you're losing estrogen everywhere, every major organ system. That's why you have symptoms all over your body. It's not just the ovaries. You have estrogen in your brain. It changes your brain. Brain fog, is symptomatic of changes in the brain from loss of estrogen. So what I would say for people who are going through perimenopause is this is really a time for you have to take care of yourself. And this is actually also the most challenging time, I think, for women. They're reaching the pinnacle of their careers. A lot of them have young children. We have aging parents, and life is very full and very rich. And sometimes your needs are at the bottom of the list. And I'm saying to you, you have to flip it, right? The reason why I really focus a lot of my practice on women at this age is that if the woman in the family is healthy, the entire family becomes healthier because they're caring for their children and they're the first ones to send an article from my Substack to their spouse. So they're the ones that are like, oh, I got on this diet and my husband lost 10 pounds. Like it's really kind of central to, I think, the health of society. Like we are the wisdom keepers, we're the connective tissue. So women at this age really have to take care of themselves because of the things that I've talked about. So there's an acceleration in your loss of muscle mass. There's an acceleration in bone loss. You become more insulin resistant. So all of a sudden with the loss of estrogen, you are at a higher risk for heart disease. You're at a higher risk for dementia. Again, 2/3 of women are, living with Alzheimer's. Like it's really more, it affects more women than it does men, again, because of our hormones. So we really do have to take very good care of ourselves because menopause is adding all of these factors and all of these additional stressors and challenges to our health. So the strategy that we have is that you kind of think sometimes like menopause makes some of our systems a little deaf. So we got to turn up the noise. You got to lift a little heavier. You got to eat more protein. You kind of have to, everything has to be a bit extra in order for our bodies to pay attention. So I do think it's about, turning it up a notch and saying, okay, this is a non-negotiable. I have to take better care of myself during menopause because I cannot escape the loss of estrogen. It is a natural process, but it has very significant impact on our health. And every woman will go through menopause if we live long enough to go through it. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to.
So, and I'm only moving along because of time. Otherwise, I think we could spend another 30 minutes on this topic because I have so many more questions. But Celia, can you tell me a little bit about intermittent fasting as it relates to women specifically? Because I think there's a lot of advice that feels like it's this general advice and it's predominantly for men. But I think women, because of our hormonal system, it's so different. So I'm curious if you have anything to say about the differences of intermittent fasting between men and women.
This is a really hot topic right now. Is the debate on is it good for us? Is it not good for us? If you go back to evolutionary biology and how we used to live, we did not have fridges. We were not having this constant influx of food, right? And so, in a way, our bodies are primed to have periods where we don't eat constantly. Now, what I will say is that intermittent fasting, personally for me, really helped reset my metabolism when I was trying to manage my blood sugar. So it was a tool that I used for a few months when I was trying to regulate my blood sugar, and it worked for me. But as the years that this was 3 years ago, so now I'm 51. So like what I will say that intermittent fasting can be a little stressful on women's hormones. So a lot of the biohacking modalities work really well for men. Men do well better in ketosis. So they're going to eat a keto diet. They're going to almost eat no carbs. It's not the same for women. So I would say I do think it can be a good tool, but I would cycle it. And it really depends on who you ask. Dr. Mary Claire Haver is one of the leading voices in menopause. Her Galveston diet has intermittent fasting as one of the tools. On the flip side, you can talk to Dr. Stacy Sims, who has worked with athletes her whole life, and it's really about kind of energy expenditure and working with our cycles and our hormones. And she would say, don't intermittent fast. You need that protein. Do not work out in a fasted state, which would really stress out your body. So my recommendation is everyone is bio-individual. I think it can be a tool. I think you can use it to your advantage. But I would say that working out in a fasted state and constantly fasting when we're trying to get 30 plus grams of protein in with each meal can be challenging for women who are going through perimenopause or who are in menopause, because you want to be a little mindful that your hormones will take it as stress, and then you'll produce more cortisol, which will contribute to more sleepless nights. It'll trigger your belly fat. You'll hold on to it. We don't want that. A lot of that is the inflammatory fat. So we can have a cascade of both positive and negative consequences. So I know that's not a definitive answer, but I think so much of how we construct our longevity plan and our day-to-day health has to be understanding our own bodies and not just taking a blanket statement. There's nothing more polarizing than nutrition. If you want to get into a fight with people on social media, make a definitive statement about some food group and you will hear from them. And intermittent fasting is also becoming one of those highly debated topics. So I think you need to see if it works for you, but I would say go into it with the mindset that you might need to cycle it or just use it to your advantage, but not to overdo it.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. Okay, so, and I'm, kind of curious, Celia, looking back on this journey that you've been on and all the categories that you're tracking when it comes to health, and what has surprised you the most?
I mean, I think so many things. I thought of myself as being a really informed person before I started working in health and wellness. And it became really apparent to me that we don't live in a culture that are prioritizing the right things. So my mission in life is to educate as many people as I can about how their bodies work so that they can make better informed decisions. And I think I have a lot of, frustration and sometimes anger towards the healthcare system, which feels like a sick care system. And I don't like this idea of closely guarded information, just having to beg for blood work or your own health data. So I think the things that were surprising to me, as someone who has had really the privilege of, good health insurance in this country and access to healthy food, and really the curiosity to always want to take care of myself, that I wasn't actually doing things that were in my benefit. The things that were defined as healthy weren't really giving me the outcomes that I wanted. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. So it really fuels my desire I want people to advocate for themselves. I want them to be curious, and I don't want them to be afraid to challenge their doctors in a kind, informed way, because it doesn't, your health is not beginning and ending in a doctor's office. It's every single decision that you make. So partner with your doctor, have your SWAT team of wellness people. Just be informed about the things that make you feel better, that this is how my body works, stay on top of your blood work. Those were the things that were probably the most surprising to me. It was a bit of an ego check, honestly. Like, I thought I was healthy, and, you know, pre-diabetes smacked me in the face. And it was honestly the best thing, because now I'm a huge advocate for it, and, definitely a loud talker. So hopefully,
yes. And speaking of that, can you share where your resources can be found on the internet, where we can learn more about you and your work and how to get in touch? I know you have this amazing newsletter.
Thank you. I have a Substack called In the Pink. It's my name, so Celia W. Chen, .substack.com. And that's where I do a lot of the deep dives. So I'll take a subject that's a little bit complicated. So maybe it's about blood sugar or body composition or peptides or some crazy biohacking thing. And I try to break it down into digestible bits so that people understand it and they can make a decision about how that impacts them or help them spring into action. So my Substack is a really good place to start. Most of it is free. I paywall a tiny bit of it because I just want to keep the community going, but most of it is free because I really want these concepts and these tips to go viral. And the other is my Instagram, which is also Celia W. Chen. My website is Celia Chen. And that's where I'll have links to classes that I'm teaching, different Zooms, different in real life events, and then also any programs and one-on-one coaching in case anyone wants support in that way.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. I love it. I am a avid reader of your newsletter and have learned so much from you. So, Celia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me and having such a thoughtful conversation.
Oh. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about how to achieve optimal health with Celia Chen. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again. What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self-mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed. And you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead.